All right. Well, I am showing it's 5, and we have a lot we're going to cover today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is being recorded, just making sure. Um, and so I wanted to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm very happy to be working with Mike Hess with the COPD Foundation. We're talking portable oxygen concentrators. How much oxygen are you really getting? So this is presented by Running on Air in partnership with the COPD Foundation as part of World Oxygen Day. So for those of you who are new to Running on Air, don't know about us, we are a 501c3 charitable organization of volunteers whose mission is to help others breathe more easily. You can follow us on social media. This recording will go up on our YouTube channel probably in a week or two. Oh, a little preface here, sorry. One thing that we are proud of this year is our POC comparison chart. So that's what this big, probably maybe confusing thing looks like here. We took all FDA approved POCs that were out at the time and just trying to make it easier for people to compare to select the POC that works best for them. And this is available on our website. And for those of you who might be medical professionals, we do have printed brochures, and you can order those from us. We will ship them for free. And you can go to runningonair.net orders. Now, we don't have a, forget exactly what it's called, but a comments column. We just have the question and answer. So I will be sending out an email with the links that we talk about in today's meeting. I will send that out later today or tomorrow morning. Right, Mike.
All right, thank you, Mary. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Mike Hess. I am a respiratory therapist by training. Currently, I am Senior Director of Public Outreach and Education for the COPD Foundation, and I lead our Oxygen 360 initiative. I've been working very closely with Mary and several other groups on trying to do some oxygen reform legislation for reimbursement, because we've recognized that a lot of folks have lost access to modes of oxygen that they used to have, like liquid oxygen in particular. We want to make sure everybody has access to the kinds of equipment that help them lead their best lives. So, of course, our broad mission is to also help folks with COPD and other related lung conditions. We have a wide variety of social media channels out there. As you can see, we've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. We've got we also have our built-in social media network on our website called COPD360 social, which you can get to at COPD360social.net. For the oxygen side of things, we also have a monthly support group, coffee hour, educational session. We cover a lot of bases on the second Wednesday of every month right now at 4 p.m. Eastern time, or folks like Mary come in and share their experiences with folks who may be new to oxygen therapy, or just have questions about things that they've experienced. And so you can register for that by that website there, copdf.co/oxy-talk. And also, Mary was kind enough to allow a little plug for our upcoming event here. As you may have heard her say, we're having our first annual World Oxygen Day this year on 10/02, October 2nd for oxygen. And our highlight event for that is what we're calling the Oxygen Stakeholder Summit, where we are bringing together a pulmonologist who is Dr. Anna Dyer, who is a strong advocate for folks in the oxygen therapy space. Chrysalis Ashton, who's a respiratory therapist like myself and director of clinical operations for one of our larger regional durable medical equipment companies here in Michigan. And then Karen Smoot and Art Randolph, who are both going to provide the patient perspective of somebody using oxygen therapy. So our goal is to first have a conversation where we identify some of the major barriers for oxygen therapy right now, mostly in the United States, but certainly a lot of these things are applicable around the world. And then we're going to discuss how we can all work together to start breaking down some of those barriers and get people the equipment they need. So hopefully you can join us for that. And if you need more information about World Oxygen Day, please feel free to check out our website at worldoxygenday.org.
All right, well, I'm going to start off with a disclaimer. The examples that are being used in this presentation to equate pulse flow with continuous flow are simplified, very simplified examples, and are not the exact equivalent to continuous flow. They are meant to be guides. The actual amount will vary by person and may also vary by POC based on the POC's technology for delivering the pulse. The mention of any POCs or companies do not constitute an endorsement. Running on Air is providing this information on FDA-approved POCs to help patients make the best POC choice for their needs. All right, portable oxygen concentrators. How much oxygen are you really getting? What we're going to cover is the basics of how POCs work, the different flow types. There's minute, fixed, or both. Continuous flow overview, an understanding of POC oxygen delivery, that settings are not the same as liters per minute. I'm going to be saying that a lot in this webinar. Settings are not standardized. We're going to show how to read oxygen minute volume delivery chart. And also just want everybody to be aware that this is all dependent on the breaths per minute, how fast you're breathing. And then we're going to talk about beware of noncentrators. So how POCs work, the basic mechanics. Well, the air we breathe normally is 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen. FDA-approved POCs work by removing the nitrogen from the surrounding air and concentrating it from about 82% to 96%. The nitrogen is filtered through sieve beds, and these sieves need to be replaced periodically. Two other things to note, the POCs usually need about 2 minutes to get to full oxygen concentration. So if you're short of breath and you turn your POC on and put that cannula in, you're not getting that 82 or 96% right away. It's going to take a couple minutes for the sieve beds to filter out that nitrogen. And that's also true, I believe, of your home concentrators. You don't flip that switch and it's automatically giving you a high concentration. And also POCs usually are only good up to a certain elevation amount. But I think most of them are up to 10,000 feet. So most POCs are pulse only. There are a few that give continuous and pulse. But this means pulse means that they only deliver oxygen when a breath is detected. And an important thing to know, POCs can have high liter flow. They can have high concentration of oxygen at all liter flows, or they can be lightweight. But with the current technology, they cannot be all three. The FDA requires the high concentration. So that means that POCs are either going to be lightweight and low flow or high flow and heavy. So we have two types of pulse delivery systems, minute and fixed. So this slide talks about minute. And what minute pulse means is the POC delivers a set amount of oxygen in a minute. And that amount is determined by the setting. And again, just settings are not the same as liters per minute. So the example I'm using, the chart over here on the right is from the Rhythm P2 user manual. The Air TiVo is the exact same machine. But the Platinum and the Live Active 5 also give, on the highest setting, 1 liter per minute. and it's a setting of 5 for all of them. So what this means is no matter your breath rate, you will receive 1 liter in a minute when you have it on setting 5. But this also means that the faster you're breathing, the less oxygen you're receiving in each breath. So if you look at that column, it's circled in red now, at 10 breaths per minute, you're getting 100 milliliters. But the numbers start going down in that column as your breath rate goes up. Fixed volume means it's giving you a fixed amount of oxygen with each breath. So if you start breathing faster, for the most part, you're still going to get the same amount of oxygen. So the example here, we're using the AirX. And that's their little graph over there on the right, again, from their user manual. You can see they've got 5 settings. So the AirX dispenses 40 milliliters, which is also 0.04 liters, with each breath at the setting of 4. And this chart goes up to 25 breaths. So it's dispensing 1 liter in a minute, but you're getting 40 milliliters every time you breathe in at the breath rate of 25. But if you look at the next line, that green line up above at the 50, you can see how it drops down. So at 25 breaths a minute, the machine cannot keep up with giving you the 50 milliliters with each breath. So it's going to drop down. So this means as your breath rate increases, the amount of oxygen you receive in each breath remains the same, basically up to the capability of the machine. And this machine goes up to 1.1 liters. This also means that the delivered amount may drop if your settings volumes can't keep up with the breath rate. But we're going to mostly focus on the minute volume. So just a little overview of continuous flow. I'm sure most people, know this. But it's just as it sounds, the oxygen's running, whether you're breathing in or not. Some of that oxygen gets lost because we're not inhaling for that entire minute. But some oxygen is held in the anatomical reservoir, and Mike will discuss that on the next slide. Most oxygen prescriptions are based on continuous flow. When we go to the doctor's office, they might have us do a 6-minute walk, and we're carrying usually a continuous flow tank with us. And they're usually based on activity. So this means our oxygen prescription is usually based on a breath rate, which is not at rest. I think that's important to note. The average breath rate at rest is 12 to 20 breaths per minute.
Yeah. So as Mary just mentioned, we think about air moving in and out of our lungs, and we don't necessarily think of like how that works with our physiology. So it's important to remember that the only place that, as one of my old respiratory instructors said, the good air goes in and the bad air comes out, is actually in the lungs themselves. This is where what we call gas exchange happens. It's the little air sacs in there called alveoli. The entire rest of the network, your trachea, your upper airways, your main stem bronchi, all that sort of thing. That's what we call dead space because it's not actually doing anything. On the map here, or on the graphic here, it's called the conducting zone. What happens with continuous flow is obviously that's not always moving all the time either. When you take a breath in, you breathe in, and then everything kind of stops for a second. And when you have continuous flow, that reservoir keeps filling up with that continuous flow of oxygen. And so what happens sometimes, again, even in your upper airways. And so if you move from, let's say you get up and start walking out to check your mail or something like that, you have kind of that extra buffer of supplemental oxygen in this conducting zone, dead space zone, whatever we want to call it, so that your body can better adapt to that. With a pulse dose system, you don't really have that because, again, it's only being delivered when you inhale. So there's no time for it to really build up. So if you were somebody who your prescription is only down in, say, the 1 to 2 liter a minute range with continuous flow, that may not be that big of an issue. But as you start getting into more advanced parts of COPD or other conditions like bronchiectasis or pulmonary fibrosis, and you need some higher gas flows, that can really start making a difference. And you won't get the same kind of performance from a portable system as with a pulse dose setting as you would with the continuous flow. And so this is just kind of, again, representing that stationary concentrator or your tank, your cylinder, all that sort of thing. It's just always flowing, but you can even hear it. Some tanks have a pulse regulator on them, or certainly the concentrators. When you hear it, when you inhale, you may hear a tss, 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 something like that because it's only pulsing.
All right, so how much oxygen does a POC provide? Well, that depends on a few things. Pulse dose provides an amount of oxygen whenever the POC senses the patient is inhaling, like Mike just mentioned. And the exact amount depends on several things. The type of pulse delivery of the machine, we talked about minute or fixed. The breathing rate of the patient, so breaths per minute, abbreviated as BPM. Resting breath rate, and we mentioned that's between 12 to 20 breaths per minute. The pulse setting, which varies by POC. And all of this makes it hard to give an exact equivalency. All right, so setting output varies by POC. I don't know if anybody who's been looking, bought a POC or were looking at POCs, sometimes they'll tell you, get your doctor to write the setting in the prescription. And this is why you should not do this. I'm pretty sure that no pulmonologist has every single FDA POC memorized as to how much oxygen each setting is giving. So this chart here is just a sampling of some of those FDA approved POCs, but the color blocks match the settings. So you can see that on that first setting, the top one, gives 0.21 liters per minute. That's the most you're getting if you're on a setting of 1. Now, you can see that top row goes up to a 1.4. That machine is not on the market yet. It's supposed to be coming out this year, but I have not seen that it is on the market yet. Now, again, the settings are different. At the 0.7 liter per minute, 3 different settings depending on the machine. So this is part of the problem with POCs and saying that settings are the same as liters per minute, or getting a prescription based on the setting. Now, this is a slightly different version. Again, we've got the color-coded settings, but these are all of the pulse only POCs from the chart I showed at the very beginning. The dark purple all the way across, these are fixed. So we're going to kind of ignore those right now. But when you look at this chart, you might say, okay, well, this looks like there is some coordination or some similarity. But another thing to be aware of is a lot of these POCs, even though they're under different names, are the same machines. Inogen and Oxygo have multiple machines. Aria and Rhythm, Aria and Rhythm again, 2 different machines, one going to 1 liter per minute, one going up to 1.2. Inogen, the next one, Inogen has 2 machines. The Rove 6 is new on the market in the US. It's been in Europe for a little bit, but it's, as of August, I think, came out in the US. Same machine pretty much as the G5, and also Oxygo. Aria, again, same as the Freestyle Comfort, and another Aria, same as the Zenolite. Now that's the fixed machine there. Okay, so I'm going to give an example, some examples of the equivalency, and this is very simplified. So let's say the doctor's prescription is for 3 liters per minute. And again, that's most likely based on continuous flow. So in our first example, the patient's at a breathing rate of 15 breaths per minute. So that's a quarter of a minute. So on continuous flow, the patient is breathing in roughly 0.75 liters per minute. That's a quarter of 3 liters. So this means that a pulse machine, a POC, that gives 0.75 liters per minute should meet the patient's need at that breath rate. And the majority of the POCs will. In example 2, the patient is now breathing at 20 breaths per minute. That's a third of a minute. So a third of 3 liters is 1 liter per minute. So if a pulse machine can give 1 liter per minute, that would meet the patient's need at this breath rate. And there are currently 15 POCs that can do this. And for 13 of those, that's on their highest setting of 5 or 6. So here we're looking at 3 liters. And if you've been hearing or under the impression that the settings were the same as liters per minute, here you're only getting this at the 5 or 6 setting. Example 3. The patient's now breathing 30 breaths per minute. That's half a minute. So on continuous flow, they're breathing in about 1.5 liters per minute. There are no pulse-only POCs that will meet that need. There are 6 continuous POCs. And our last example is at a breath rate of 40, 2/3 of a minute. So on continuous flow, you're breathing in about 2 liters per minute. There are 5 continuous POCs that will meet this need. And these continuous POCs do have pulse settings also. But the lightest is 10 pounds. And that can get us into a debate of how portable they are at that point.
Mary, one thing I also want to point out on this slide, because I think it does a nice job of adding some context to it. The whole idea to a portable oxygen concentrator is that it's portable, right? This is something that you're supposed to be able to take with you while you're active, and so on and so forth. And you've mentioned a couple of times that a lot of these measurements are based on a resting breath rate. And I think it's really important for everybody to remember that when you have a lung problem and you start moving, you're going to be going well above that resting breath rate. So, and I know you'll talk about this again in a little bit, but most people here, when you're using the portable concentrator, you're going to be in that 20 to 30 or even higher range. And so again, it's very important to understand that you have to be able to get that piece of equipment that's going to have those higher settings on there and understand how they work.
Yeah. And, if your prescription is for 3 liters and you're using your machine, your POC at the gym at a breath rate of 40 breaths per minute, it's not meeting that need. I mean, unless you have, like I said, one of those 5, but if you're using a pulse only, it's not meeting that need. And, trust me, I wish it did. I don't like bringing what it takes to the gym, but that's what I have to do if I want to, really work out. Okay. So this is just to highlight again. Up top, this is based on the example we just had. The chart up top shows liters per minute. So that 1.25, 1.5 across to 5. Those are the liters per minute. And then we've got breath rates down on the left side. So those decimal places, that's the amount of liters that are needed for the machine to give to meet the breath rate. So we just did an example of 3. We talked about 0.75 liters at 15 breaths per minute, etc. So that's that column. Well, if we look at the POCs, the chart down at the bottom, we saw an example of that earlier. That 15 breaths per minute rate. there it is in the chart. And you can see that's already a setting of 4 or 5 for the machine, for these machines here. And for one here, the second from the top, it's already maxed out. If you do 20 breaths per minute, that takes us to 1 liter. And that's almost a max for the rest of the machines. 1.5, POC won't handle that. 40 breaths per minute, these POCs won't handle that. So I saw somebody just raise their hand. We're going to do the presentation and answer questions at the end. I am sorry that I didn't say that at the beginning. So please put your questions in the Q&A, and we will be going through those after the presentation. Okay, so why is there confusion? There's misunderstanding and misinformation, and because it's confusing. You know, when you're looking at these charts, you know, what the heck does all of this mean? The one on the left, we saw before, that was for the minute pulse. We saw the RX graph also. The chart above that is their minute pulse graph. But I also want to point out the P2, circled here in red, milliliters, but on the RX, they use cc. And our prescriptions are written in liters. So, you know, it's confusing. There's no standardization in the language. So again, confusing language and numbers. Settings are not liters per minute. Beware of best case scenario language, like equivalent up to 5 liters per minute. So that's usually at the lowest breath rate, which coincidentally usually matches the highest setting. And this gives the impression that the settings are the same as liters per minute, which they are not. And just note that they use that same up to language with battery life. Up to 10 hours, but not when you've got it on the highest setting. So prescriptions are in liters per minute. POC charts are in milliliters or cubic centimeters. That's the cc. cc is the same as milliliters. So just know that that's going to be the same measurement. And there are 1,000 milliliters in a liter. All right, so taking a look, we've got 3 settings or 5 settings, but not 3 or 5 liters. This is what also adds to the confusion. So Precision Medical sells 2 different machines, and they claim patients can choose between a 3 or a 5 liter machine right out there on the website. Yet on page 7 of their user manual, and that's what this graphic is, it shows that 3 setting machine gives a maximum of 520 milliliters, and that the 5 setting machine gives 780 milliliters. So we're going to debunk that it gives 3 or 5 liters. The Easy Pulse 3, so that's 0.52 liters per minute on a setting of 3, on the highest setting. We use 3 liters for our example. Here's what we would expect 3 liters to deliver at all these breath rates. And here's what it actually does deliver. So you can see even at 15 breaths per minute, it falls short of 3 liters per minute. And in order to claim 3 liters per minute, you have to go down to a breath rate of 10 breaths per minute, which is below the accepted resting breath per minute resting range. Easy Pulse 5, same thing, 0.78 liters per minute on the highest setting. Here's what we expect at 5 liters per minute. And this is what the machine is actually providing. So this one comes closer to giving you the 3 liters, but only at the 15 breaths per minute. And you can see how it drops down. If you're exercising, breathing 40 breaths per minute, you're only getting about 1 liter. All right, 5 settings, not 5 liters. So this is from the fixed volume that I showed, the AirX machine. On their manual, page 26, output setting display 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 liters per minute. That's wrong. Those are the settings. They're not liters per minute. And even a web search, compact 5-liter machine. So there's misinformation all over the place. The P2, I know it's really hard to see down there where the arrow's pointing, but it says equivalent to up to 5 liters. And just go through this example for the P2. So 1 liter, a setting of 5, that's how much we need in order to meet 5 liters at all of these breath rates. And here's how much it delivers. So you can see at 12 breaths per minute, it does meet the 5, but it does not as your breath rate goes up. And that's the confusion and the misinformation. Because as Mike pointed out, this is when we're being active. 12 breaths per minute is not active. 12 breaths per minute is not walking around doing your grocery shopping. 12 breaths per minute is not out playing with your kids. 12 breaths per minute is not out on a walk with your spouse. All right, I'm not going to go through the other examples in order to save time, but just say, you know, this is all similar. So I'm just going to click through these quickly. And this is the one that's not. Oh, sorry, Mike.
Oh, no, one thing I would also emphasize here is it's not just what you see on the website. It's not just what you see in any kind of advertising materials. This is what you're also probably hearing from your pulmonologist or your primary care provider, potentially your durable medical equipment provider. The confusion is not, it's not necessarily a ploy or anything like that, although I certainly would call on everybody to work together to clarify a lot of these things. This is just the state of things right now. You, like I said, you will probably go to, you could go to a pulmonologist anywhere in the country and they could easily tell you that it's the equivalent kind of thing. Just because we as a healthcare system, and arguably those of us, especially on the advocacy side, haven't done a great job of doing that education. It was something that even as a respiratory therapist of many years, I didn't really fully understand until later in my career when I started doing these things, doing this kind of thing on the regular. So that's something we're hoping to change going forward. But as I'm sure Mary will point out again and again, the biggest, most important takeaway here is that the settings are just not the same as a liter flow, continuous liter flow.
Yeah. All right. And I just want to point out too, I mean, again, this is where there's a lot of misinformation, not saying that it's intentional. There might be disconnects between the advertising departments and the technology department. Here on Inogen's website, it's highlighted. I know that's hard to read, so I broke it out here. They say, generally speaking, portable oxygen concentrators, including Inogen 1 portable oxygen concentrators, typically offer liter flows from 1 to 6 liters per minute. Now, again, you might be able to get 6 liters out of a machine, but that's at a resting breath rate. And that's on the highest setting.
I do want to throw down to the Q&A real quick, because there's just a clarification question. Just to clarify, this is how much that is needed per breath in order to get a total of X liters per minute of oxygen. On a simplified level, yes. I mean, there's going to be a lot of other factors that are involved in that, but unless we want to go through a couple of continuing education classes and sit through some physics and biology and stuff, this is as close as we're going to get to just kind of explaining it in a straightforward way. So we need a certain amount of liters in each breath. and all of those cumulatively are going to get to that liters per minute.
Okay, so a quick overview of how to read a minute settings flow chart. We've seen this chart before. This is from the P2, and it's the same as the Air TiVo. So the amount of oxygen from each setting will be shown along with the breath rate. And again, note that the amount of oxygen in each pulse declines at the breath rate increases. This is so you get that full 1 liter over the course of a minute. These numbers are shown in milliliters, and they look pretty impressive in milliliters, don't they? This is what they would look like if they were written in liters to match your prescription. So 21 or even 100 in that column, that very first 100, looks a lot more impressive than 0.1. And the 21 at 10 breaths per minute, 0.21. So the maximum you're getting from this setting is 0.21 liters per minute. And I know that's a very quick overview, but hopefully from the examples and from this, it gives you the idea. So no matter your breathing rate, you're getting the setting limit. And again, this is on minute volume. So on setting 5 here, that's 1 liter. All right, so the question everybody has, what's the best POC? The one that works for you. Not trying to be a smartass, but it gives you the oxygen you need to meet your lifestyle. This may mean you only use a POC when you fly. This is going to vary for everyone, I think, based on their prescription. For those who have lower liter flow needs, the POC will work better than those that have a higher flow need. And those that have higher flows, the POCs probably won't work at all.
Yeah, and I think, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Mike.
No, I think that's a great point to put out there for a couple of reasons. First of all, a lot of this does sound kind of doom and gloom and like, oh, nothing's going to work or anything like that. And that's not really the case. I mean, there are a lot of folks. There's somebody in the chat, for example, that says, why should we be interested in this? I use my G5 at level 2 and push it up to 3 when walking up inclines. That's great. I think that could be entirely appropriate as long as you're also making sure that you're monitoring your oxygen saturation and all that sort of thing. That may entirely be appropriate for you. But if you are somebody who is, for example, on 5 liters of who would normally need 5 liters of continuous flow oxygen, and you go to your pulmonologist or your equipment provider and you say, hey, I need something, I'm tired of lugging around the tank, I want to do something different. And they go and say, oh, well, this machine, it has a 5 on it, so that must be the same as 5 liters a minute. You're going to get that piece of equipment, and that's not going to serve your needs very well. So the why of why somebody should be interested in this is because it's really important to work with your entire healthcare team to make sure that you're getting the appropriate piece of equipment. Hopefully you can try it out a little bit, take it for a test drive, so to speak, and make sure that it's going to work for you, because not all of these machines are going to work for every person. That's the most important thing.
Right. And maybe you don't want the POC for when you're walking around. Maybe you just want to have a POC so that you can go to your knitting club. You're going to be sitting there knitting, so you don't need a higher liter flow. So, it's really dependent, I think, on what your needs are. So if nothing else from this part of the presentation, what to remember. Settings are not liters per minute. You can go to Running on Air's website, runningonair.org/POCs, to get that comparison chart I showed at the beginning. We're putting up POC links. So one of the things we're working on adding, this is not up there yet, but hopefully by the end of the month, to make it easier to look and compare POCs is information like this. We're going to be showing the machine, the settings the machine has, and then this breath rate chart color coded. But again, I just want to emphasize that this is not exact. And I'm going to use the example, the second setting of the air TiVo is 0.42 liters per minute. Well, if you look at 15 breaths per minute, sorry, I don't have it being circled in red, but it's kind of the 0.44 that's in between some of these green shades. Well, that's pretty close to 0.42. So even though we're not showing that this meets the need, and that might meet your need there at that level. So this is meant just to be more of a guide.
We have, in my opinion, we've historically, and for a variety of reasons, looked at oxygen as just a thing. It's like a nebulizer, it's like an inhaler, it's just this object that's supposed to give you therapy. What we really should be looking at is it's more like some kind of prosthetic. It's like an artificial limb. It's like eyeglasses. It's like whatever, a couple of different kinds of things that we can look at it like that. Because, again, there's going to be a lot of variation from person to person. And maybe 0.44 is enough for somebody, but maybe that another person really does need that 0.46. It can be that small of a thing sometimes, or maybe it's situational, or maybe this year you're good at that level, but maybe you have an exacerbation or you get COVID or pneumonia or something else. And next year, now you're not going to be able to use that piece of equipment because you have a higher demand. So again, it's one of those things that we need to continually be looking at so that we can keep making sure that this piece of equipment is supporting your needs.
Yeah. So the best way to know if you're getting enough oxygen is with a reliable pulse oximeter. So using this machine in conjunction with your pulse oximeter, if you're able to use a lower setting and you're staying oxygenated while you're walking around, that's great. But that's the best way of knowing if you're getting enough. And then the final, again, POCs can have high liter flow. They can have high concentration of oxygen at all liter flows or be lightweight, but they can't be all three. And that's where Mike's going to take it away.
Yeah, so a couple of things, again, just to get into the chat, because there's a couple of fairly easy questions, and then there's a fantastic segue. So first, the easy one is, do any portable concentrators do 5 liters of minute continuous? Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. That's just not the physics of the way we do oxygen concentration right now simply does not allow for that. I think, Mary, you mentioned there's a 2 or 3 liter machine out there that weighs about 20 pounds. It's kind of a drag behind, not necessarily a portable in the sense that we often think of it, but and again, it's going to be even heavier in order to get it up to that 5 liters of continuous flow. So unfortunately, that's bad news. Where does it say the FDA actually approves any concentrator? It's kind of a gray area because they don't technically like to use the word approve, because a lot of the devices that come on the market are based on previous devices. And so it's kind of a certification analysis kind of thing where they make sure that it's safe and, all the parts in it are going to be okay and things like that. And then also a lot of it is left to the Federal Aviation Administration because you have to have an oxygen concentrator in order to fly. So there's a couple of different certifications and things like that on there. But I guess the real answer to the question is, do they actually approve anything? Technically, the answer would have to be no. And then the great segue is, there's all this misleading and misinformation out there. Do you think this is deliberately fraudulent or just stupid? I don't know that I would use the word stupid. I'll say that. I will say that, we have a lot of moving parts here. We've got in the portable or in any oxygen space, you've got engineers, you've got clinicians, you've got administrators, you've got therapists, you've got the people who are using the machines, the people who are prescribing the machines, the people who are designing the machines, the people who are selling the machines, all that sort of thing. We don't all speak the same language. I'm sure everybody here has a story about, well, my doctor said this with 10 words that each had 8 syllables in them, and I had no idea what they were talking about. If I went to go to talk to, sometimes I'm talking with our marketing team, our communications team at the foundation, and I have no idea what they're talking about with these analyses and metrics and analytics and all that sort of thing. We just don't speak the same language. And so when you have any kind of barrier like that, stuff is going to get lost in translation. So that part I don't think I think we could do better on, but I think that's reasonable. Now, where there is some deliberate fraud, in my opinion, and hopefully we can get this going here. Oh, actually, I guess I should do that. And then always smooth going from one share to another on a Zoom call. We're going to do, let's close that out again. Try one more time. And hopefully we can get to, yeah, okay. So this is going to start about halfway through a slideshow that we did with the Food and Drug Administration to kind of share some of these issues with them and help them explain a little bit better. And what we found is because there are a lot of people who have this confusion and because there's not a lot of great information out there all the time, we do see that online retailers have kind of an open marketplace for certain kinds of abuse. This was a search on the most popular, one of the most popular online retailers not long ago that I did, basically in incognito mode with no cookies or anything like that. So it was as close to a clean search as I could. Search for portable oxygen concentrator, and I got all of these devices here. Some of which look very similar to some of the devices that are on the market right now. Some of them obviously look a little bit different. For example, there's this one here that's the oxygen concentrator, portable oxygen for travel, health help, so on and so forth. You'll note here that it's telling us that it can do 2 to 9 liters of household equipment. That's its big marketing thing. And, again, this looks like a real medical device. It's talking about liters. It's got all the nice little O2 bubbles popping out of it. We scroll down the page a little bit and it's got this really nice graphic on here. It looks very high tech, very industrial, just like you would expect a piece of medical equipment to say. Oh, and then, oh, hey, look, it's 93% concentration at 2 to 9 liters. That looks fantastic. This is really going to fit my needs, and that's really what they're emphasizing. And then if you haven't got caught in by the sales pitch yet, maybe you keep scrolling down the page. Hopefully, maybe you'll see in the very fine print a couple of times down there. We'll zoom in a little bit. This oxygen concentrator is 2 to 9 liters per minute. When the number 2 is oxygen flow is the highest, until 9, the oxygen flow is the lowest. Now, again, we're talking about communications barriers and things like that. Hopefully, what I take this to mean is when it's at setting 2, which is the lowest flow, you're going to get the most oxygen. And that's not actually going to carry through. That 93% is not going to carry through until you get to those higher levels, which again is the implication here. And then we start seeing some of the reviews here. This is, people are starting to see that, these machines are completely useless and had a low cost effectiveness. They're very appealing because they're a lot cheaper than some of the other devices on the market. And you can get them without a prescription, but they're just not working. It's broken again. It's disappointing. All these things. This person even said that, boy, I really wish I had talked to my physician. I think they said physician or their healthcare provider before I bought it. Their takeaway here was, and this is their quote, I would like to emphasize that when purchasing medical equipment, it is important to carefully study and understand the performance, functionality, and usage of the machine. I should have consulted with the doctor. Again, it's a lot of this equipment, the ones that are available by prescription, all that sort of thing, they might work for you very well, but you have to understand the performance and function in order to get that best benefit out of it. And certainly it's not the only machine. I mean, we can see, dozens and dozens of these things out there that, again, have these great graphics on there. This one's talking about 1 to 8 liters. Oxygen concentration reached 93%. Well, that's great. But, again, it's that kind of as low as or as much as, all that sort of thing. There's a lot of wiggle room in there. And these also have similar issues there. I don't know why it's saying move the window away. A lot of these things often have deceptive advertising. You've got somebody in a white coat here. You've got somebody who looks like very clinical. This person looks very clinical, and you've got a couple having a good time over there, because they're able to use their oxygen equipment. Here, you've got somebody putting it on, looking very clinical, and he's having a lot of help with this. they're talking about these pieces of equipment have um, wide applications. Children, pregnancy, sport people. I've even seen it, you can even, if you're needing to study or if you have a hangover, a lot of those things are apparently these oxygen concentrators will just take care of it all. And again, this one says that it'll even make oxygen, and that's just not a thing that happens. And we can concentrate it and deliver it and all that sort of thing, but we just can't make it right now. So the upshot here is we also did a study last year with Dr. Richard Casaburi from the UCLA Medical Center. I'm just going to kind of gloss through this a little bit. He has a device out there called the metabolic simulator that was actually capable of looking at how much oxygen was being produced by these things and would be able to be metabolized by somebody. Again, looking at some of the scientific details on there. Basically, we ran it through a couple of different scenarios, people with minimal exertion, moderate exertion, heavy exertion, in different settings on the machines. Also comparing it to a traditional oxygen tank and a standard oxygen, a portable oxygen concentrator that you could get with a prescription. And we found one of them only essentially had one setting, even though it had multiple settings. We considered maybe it was broken, but we would really have no way to know because there was also no customer service available. There was one that really essentially all the settings were the same no matter what we did. And then there was one that was kind of sort of in the ballpark of the FDA concentrator, or the prescription concentrator, I should say, but was still a little bit underneath what we would expect for that performance. So from an advocacy standpoint, what we are asking the Food and Drug Administration and the Federal Trade Commission to do, you can see again here kind of the summary of one, well, I forgot the one device that was portable but didn't even have a battery. So we're hopeful that we can get some of this information out there, first of all, to clinicians, and secondly, to the community, to do kind of a buyer beware situation. And then from an advocacy standpoint, we are hoping that FDA will provide a stronger and more public warning about oxygen devices that are sold without a prescription. There is a brief mention of it on one page of their website, but it just does not do much service to that. We're also asking that they consider classifying these machines as medical devices, and since they will not be approved in the US, prohibit them from being imported and sold. And then again, partner with appropriate agencies to create higher standards for medical equipment in general to try to prevent some of these things from happening again. And then also just helping us do a better job of teaching clinicians and everybody else to how these things work.
And I just want to remind everybody that to get a medically approved portable concentrator, you need a prescription.
Yes, thank
So
you.
if you
Thank you
can
for
buy a machine without a prescription, you really don't know what you're getting. Even if it were giving you the high levels of oxygen, it may not be filtering harmful particles out. So you want to make sure you're getting an FDA approved, and prescription will be required.
excellent point. Thank you. All right.
One more thing, Mike, I just want to mention, we say, we're trying to make more people aware of this. And, I think the comparison chart is a great way of doing that. If you're going to your pulmonologist or your cardiologist, print out a few copies of that and give it to them. Tell them they can, you know, it says right on the chart, they can contact us to order them, and we'll send them a whole bunch of brochures. But, I think it's really going to take us as patients talking to our doctors to help make them aware.
I think that's certainly where it starts. Again, I think there are a lot of stakeholders in the oxygen community.
Yeah.
I think the manufacturers can work together. I think, we as advocacy groups, whether it's pulmonary fibrosis, COPD, we have a great capacity to create that kind of education. We just haven't yet. And so my hope would be to work with a lot of our partners to do continuing education, to help early professionals, whether they're folks in medical school or residents or whoever it is, learn more about that right from the get-go. Because again, that's what's really going to cut down on this, on the misinformation and confusion that's out there. because as somebody mentions in the questions, a lot of docs don't know anything about home medical equipment, because we've often had this disconnect too, where we'll have a prescriber write the order, and then it comes out from a durable medical equipment provider. So who does the education? Who knows what equipment is available? Who does, who's responsible for what? And it's just, there's a lot of work to do. I think you're right that the education starts with patient self-advocacy and caregiver self-advocacy, and then it kind of percolates up to us in the advocacy community, working with our industry partners, and then eventually we get into overall education.
Mike, so a question for you says, I am a CO2 retainer. Is my POC contributing to that?
Yeah, it's hard to answer in this context. My initial thought would be it's unlikely. Again, that's a whole other physiological thing, and we can get into the whole idea of, a lot of people will talk about this whole idea of the hypoxic drive and things like that, and that's an ongoing controversy in the pulmonary world. The short answer is probably not, but it's difficult to answer in this context just because we don't have enough of your information. If it is something you're concerned about, certainly bring it up with a pulmonologist and see what if they feel you're at risk for that, or anything like that.
And we have a question, is liquid oxygen available and for whom? And when does one have to move to tanks? So that's something that's being worked on. It really depends on who your provider is. Most providers have stopped supplying liquid oxygen, but there are a group of us that have been working to try to get, advocacy groups, patients who have been working to bring liquid oxygen back, make it more readily available.
And then, so the part two of that, when do you have to move to tanks? Again, difficult to say, because it's going to depend on your individual provider. There are some people out there who are still able to successfully get liquid oxygen. There really aren't many new starts out there, as far as I know, and it's going to be very dependent on your region and your individual company.
All right, I require 4 to 6 liters per minute continuous. How can I travel anyway and run stationary concentrator in my SUV cross country?
That would be tricky. Stationary concentrators draw an awful lot of power, and I don't think, because my first thought was, well, maybe they could get one of those little things, and you can turn your cigarette lighter into a regular wall outlet adapter kind of thing. But then I got to thinking that that's just a lot of power draw. Um, Unfortunately, there's not a great way to go about that at that liter flow. Tanks would probably be the first thing that comes to mind. It's possible. Well, I won't even say possible that a portable concentrator would do that, because at 4 to 6 liters, I just don't see how there would be any equivalence. But it would unfortunately be very difficult to travel across the country, or really for any length of time, and that's not acceptable to me as a clinician or advocate, and that's why we're trying to fight for better things. It's easy to say and doesn't really help you very much, but that is unfortunately the state of things at the moment.
The one thing I would just sort of, you know, is that 4 to 6 liters while you're just sitting. But again, a POC, the most a continuous flow POC would go up is 3 liters. So, that may not meet your need. But a lot of the POCs do have adapters. I think if we continue putting pressure on the companies, they'll work on improving the technology, and maybe we will get some equipment that delivers more and lighter weight one day.
Another quick answer is this presentation being recorded to watch later? Yes, it is.
Yes.
Check
It'll
out
probably be about 2 weeks before I get it up.
and that's via the Running on Air social media network,
Yes.
YouTube
Yeah.
and
And
stuff.
I will email it to everybody who registered.
Another fairly quick answer to these calculations apply to pulse regulators. They will have their own set of calculations. You'll be able to, they also will tell you in their packaging what their bolus size is. That's the amount of oxygen that comes out with each puff. So it's not, the concepts are the same, but the calculations might be slightly different. So would you say as a clinician, it is more important that we encourage clients with oxygen to monitor their finger pulse oximetry than be too concerned with the number on the tank? I have clients come in to exercise that are reluctant to adjust the level as their doc has told them to be at 3. And again, when it comes to a tank, again, it can be a little bit of a grayer area. When you're exercising and things like that, there's likely going to be no issue. And yes, absolutely, you should keep an eye on your pulse oximetry. Titrate and migrate, as a lot of my oxygen therapy using friends say. I'd definitely be more concerned about that. When at rest, I would probably want to be a little bit more conservative with that. And again, I mean, I guess again, the answer is going to be, yeah, it's based on your oximetry, because you don't necessarily want it to be too high, because then you're just kind of wasting oxygen and all that sort of thing, wasting battery life, all that and all that. But obviously you don't want it to be too low either. So as Mary said, everybody should have a good quality pulse oximeter to help guide their therapy. Noting, as Angelique says in the chat, my concern is I have Raynaud's, which is a circulatory issue in the extremities. It makes it difficult and a struggle to measure oxygen levels. So trying to pay attention to the body. Absolutely true, and that's the flip side to pulse oximeters, is that not only do they have to be good quality, but you have to understand how to use them, what their limitations are, and things like that. And we're kind of finding that out as we go. We've known about things like nail polish and stuff like that for a while, but we're seeing skin tone can affect that. Obviously, circulatory issues can affect that. So it's one piece of the puzzle. It's the probably the easiest piece we have to use, but it's only one piece.
So Dave, that was the question about requiring 4 to 6. So yeah, driving cross country is going to be really tough, and I think the only option would probably be e-tanks, but that's a lot of e-tanks to carry. Maybe if you're with a national company, you can make pit stops at their locations and drop off what you have and pick up new ones. I mean, I don't know if that's a possibility. Um, yeah, it's unfortunate.
That's our World Oxygen Day shirt for this year. Is I heart and lung oxygen. So
And you can purchase those if you go to the World Oxygen Day website, right, Mike?
yes,
Is the link there?
there is a link there. Yes.
Okay. And like I said at the beginning, I'll be sending out an email either tonight or tomorrow with all the links we talked about, just so you have those resources and can register for some of the other Oxygen Day events.
What type of portable concentrator for airline travel of 5 hours? Again, it's going to depend on your oxygen demand. One that's going to fit your one that in most cases is going to exceed your current oxygen demand, because it's also important to remember that airplanes are not pressurized all the way down to sea level. They're pressurized to about I think it's 6,000 feet. So there are fewer oxygen molecules for the machine to concentrate, so it might have a little bit harder time oxygenating you. There are certain places that can do what's called a high altitude simulation test, that you can go and see if your oxygen equipment can handle that, but it's difficult to say any one type in particular. Just one that is at the very least oxygenating you now, and hopefully has some wiggle room to give you a little bit extra boost if you need to turn it up.
And you're going to need extra batteries. The depending on your um, prescription. Um, but if you're needing 2 or 3 liters of oxygen, you're probably going to need a few batteries because you'll have the POC on a higher setting. I do want to just read Ricky brought up Freedom Link can make connections for travelers if they need O2 tanks. Um,
And,
so so that might be a resource.
and similarly, yes, a mechanic can install a converter into the vehicle. I don't know. Again, I haven't really looked into whether the power draw of a stationary concentrator would exceed what a vehicle can provide. Um, it's possible. That's one I don't know, honestly. No airlines allow tanks at all. That's a FAA regulation. It has to be a portable oxygen concentrator.
Now, I have heard that you can arrange with some airlines to use their oxygen on board, and I've also heard that that's expensive. But that's a possibility if needed.
Um, Marianne, I don't know if you saw the question, but somebody was asking about the batteries that you use to run your marathons.
Oh, no, I did not see that. Yeah, so I was using I have a different machine now. My oxygen needs have gone up, but I use the double battery. And when I did the New York Marathon in 2019, my husband walked it with me because he was carrying 6 pounds of extra batteries. So I think I had to change the batteries out, even with the double. I was on the highest setting every 3 hours.
I'm sorry, that was actually the question was how many batteries did you need? I went back and looked.
Oh, okay, okay. Um, yeah, I think I either needed three. I think it was definitely 3 doubles, and I may have had a partial single use in there too.
And so then just backing up a little bit to the flight question, 10,000 altitude is only as far as the units will go. That is true. That's still a fair bit of wiggle room between the pressurization at 6,000 feet and then the as high as 10,000 feet. Um, and again, it's just going to depend on everybody's individual oxygenation needs. So um, it fits in that zone, hopefully somewhere. And then we've got somebody who makes a 3-hour car trip fairly frequently, a Jackery 1000. I suspect that's some kind of large power bank or something like that, and then is able to recharge that before the trip back. That's a cool solution. That's something that I have not really seen before. I'll have to look into that a little bit more. Those heavy duty battery packs, probably the larger cousins of something you might use to charge your phone or something like that. That's a really interesting idea. Thank you for sharing that. Can you use a mask with a portable concentrator? Would not recommend it. Again, your portable concentrators are designed to sense a certain amount of flow in order to give you that oxygen pulse. I know that there are some oxygen masks that are just basically like a little skeleton kind of thing, and instead of wearing the cannula, I still wouldn't recommend it. Better safe than sorry, unfortunately.
I
Um,
bought a cheaper POC. How do I know how much O2 it's giving?
There are also oxygen analyzers for sale. I don't know if they're also available through the online retailer, but also your local friendly neighborhood durable medical equipment provider should have one on hand to check their own equipment. And I suspect that they would be willing to check out your equipment to see what that's putting out and hopefully get you on a more appropriate device if necessary.
Although I will say hearing a cheaper POC concerns me a little as to whether that might be one of the noncentrators that Mike talked about.
Yeah, if it's that cheap of a portable concentrator, you won't know because as somebody mentioned, there's in the drawings of the machines, there wasn't really any kind of sieve bed noted or anything like that. These machines also don't usually have a lot of alarms or things like that, and may not tell you if the sieve bed needs to be changed out, replaced, that sort of thing. So frankly, you can analyze it, but you're probably best off um, speaking with your clinician and your durable medical equipment provider to get a prescription machine.
All right. Ricky shared the Freedom link. So I copied that and I will share that when I send out the email.
A device you can wear that will beep if you go below your oxygen.
There is there is one I've seen on Amazon, and I will say I'm not sure of the accuracy of it, but you can set it to beep if it goes below a certain level.
That would kind of be my concern as well. I mean, they've done tests on smartwatches and things like that that can test your pulse oximetry, and they do tend to be fairly accurate as long as nothing else is going on. They're usually tested while you're at rest and you've settled down for a few minutes and all that sort of thing. So there are some things in development. I know there's an ear based one that's in development, and I'm sure there's some other stuff out there. But so the answer is yes with a big asterisk. Limit on flight length if you have pulmonary arterial hypertension on oxygen therapy. Not that I'm aware of, as long as, again, you can demonstrate you have enough battery life for, I believe it's 1.5 times your flight time. I think is the FAA regulation. And you might want to run that past your clinician too, just to make sure that they don't have any concerns about it. All right, those are some great questions.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank everybody, and Mike, I want to thank you for staying 15 minutes later. We were looking at an hour. And I just want to mention, I threw out to Mike over the weekend, maybe doing more webinars next year. So would love to hear from you guys. I'll send out the email, and you can respond back if you have any topic ideas that you would like to see.
I definitely want to highlight this, and thank you for attending today. In the chat, we've got, as a pulmonologist, I agree, many of us do not know what we should about portable oxygen concentrators, but we can be taught. Absolutely. I've learned so much from many of my patients. Appreciate all you do to help educate us. We can do better.
And
I wholeheartedly agree.
I just want to add, send Running on Air an email. We'll send you the brochures to give out to your patients also, and your fellow pulmonologists.
Yeah. Absolutely. Starts with patients as self-advocates, and then, like I said, it kind of percolates up. So thank you, Mary, for carrying the ball on a lot of these things and putting together this webinar. And absolutely would love to do some more education over the coming year.
Yeah, we've got a few more questions. Or someone, I use the WellU ring, and I love it. You have to be aware of variability, but it does alert you if you go low. Seems pretty accurate, except if you have cold hands.
And
I
again,
think
that's going to be the thing. It's just paying attention to not necessarily relying on it 100%.
All right. Well, again, thank you all. Hopefully this was informative, that you learned something, and hope to see you back at another webinar. And thank you, Mike. Very much appreciate your partnering and your putting the World Oxygen Day together for all of us.
Well, let's hope it's a starting point. That's for sure.
Yeah. All right, everybody, take care.